Western Reserve University School of Medicine in Cleveland, Ohio. This is the All Access Med School Admissions Podcast. Hello again, everybody. I'm your host, Christian Nessman, and I'm the Senior Director of Admissions and Financial Aid here at the medical school. It's great to be with you here again, and I get a lot of requests from listeners for schools they'd like to hear from, so I really do try and fulfill these requests as best as I can. From time to time, some listeners tell me they want to hear from more osteopathic medical schools. So I reached out to some friends of mine here in Ohio at the Ohio University Heritage College of Osteopathic Medicine for this episode. And I hope to be able to bring you some more osteopathic schools in the future. If you're new to this show and aren't quite sure what the differences are between allopathic medical schools and osteopathic medical schools, then I would suggest that you go way back to episode 1, where we start straight up with med school admissions lingo. So go check that out if you're a little unsure. Now, let me give you some background on this medical school. The Ohio University Heritage College of Osteopathic Medicine, or OUHCOM, or as you'll hear me say in this conversation a lot, HCOM, is located along the Hocking River in the picturesque rural surroundings of Athens, Ohio. For reference, Athens is about an hour and a half south of Columbus, Ohio. OUHCOM opened in 1975 to help alleviate the state's growing shortage of family physicians and to train doctors for chronically underserved areas. Since then, they have expanded to a total of 3 campus locations, with one in Dublin, Ohio, which is in the suburbs of Columbus, and Cleveland, Ohio. Today, they are a nationally recognized leader in the education of osteopathic primary care physicians and the #1 producer of primary care physicians in the country. The mission of OUHCOM is to educate physicians committed to practice in Ohio, emphasizing primary care, engaging in focused research, and embracing both Appalachian and urban communities. Integral to this mission, the college community commits itself to providing a clinically integrated, learner-centered osteopathic medical education continuum for students, interns, residents, and primary care associates, while embracing diversity in public service and improving the health and well-being of underserved populations. They're a public institution and accept applications via the ACOMAS application service from U.S. citizens outside the state of Ohio and those with United States permanent residency. For the entering class of 2020, the Ohio University Heritage College of Osteopathic Medicine received about 4,900 applications and interviewed 512 for a class of 250, with one being a DO/PhD. 51% of those entering in 2020 were women, and 11% self-identified from groups underrepresented in medicine. All right, let me tell you about my guest today. Dr. John Schreiner is the Associate Dean of Admissions and Student Affairs and is an assistant professor in the Department of Social Medicine at OUHCOM and serves on the senior leadership team of the medical school. Dr. Schreiner has been working in higher education for the past 34 years and with the last 32 years focusing on medical school admissions. Dr. Schreiner is also a graduate of Ohio University and went on to get his master's in education at Cleveland State University with a concentration in adult learning and development. Then in 2006, John completed his doctoral degree back at Ohio University in the College of Communication with a focus on communication in aging family, specifically adult sibling communication and its implications in elder care. His area of interest and concentration is with the aging population and the perceptions, demographics, and socioeconomic implications this population has in our society. Dr. Schreiner is a former 2-term chair of the Council of Osteopathic Medical Admissions Officers of the American Association of Colleges of Osteopathic Medicine. In addition, Dr. Schreiner has been an active member of the National Association of Advisors to the Health Professions, or NAAHP. You've heard us talk about that before. For 33 years, he's been involved with them and has given numerous presentations all over the country. Him and I have done some presentation work together too, I might add. My other guest is Jill Harmon. Jill is the Senior Director of Admissions and Recruitment for OUHCOM. She has worked in higher education for the past 28 years with an 18-year focus on medical school admissions. She has served as chair of the Council of Osteopathic Medical Admissions Officers and has presented to national organizations such as the American Association of Colleges of Osteopathic Medicine and the AAMC and regional associations of the SNMA and LAMSA chapters. Jill is a graduate of Glendale State College with a Bachelor of Science degree in Behavioral Science and a minor in music. In 2001, she earned her Master's in Education from Ohio University in Higher Education Administration. When she's not working, Jill enjoys paper crafting, hunting for treasures at antique malls, and spending time with her husband, Mark, and their two canine fur babies, Zuzu and Gimli. All right, let me get you right into my conversation with these two. Enjoy. Hey, Dr. Schreiner, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming on the show. Thanks and taking a little time out of your day, and even going back to back Zoom meetings. So thanks for doing this, man.
Hey, it's good to see you, Christian. Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, well, I've had a lot of people emailing me saying, "Can you get more osteopathic medical schools?" And I'm like, I have the right people. So I'm, when we started having our interview or our emails going back and forth about this, I was thrilled that you and Joe wanted to jump in and do this with me. So we're going to talk all about the Heritage College of Osteopathic Medicine. Before we do, there's a couple things I want listeners to hear, and that is, John, when you're at college, when you're at fairs and stuff, and a student walks up and says, "Oh, you're an osteopathic school. How are you different than allopathic?" What's kind of your few lines or your elevator speech to them to help them understand the differences and maybe similarities? Do you have something you kind of keep in your back pocket?
Yeah, sure, certainly, because that's a very common question, as you might imagine. So, usually when somebody asks, what is osteopathic medicine? How does it differ than its allopathic counterpart? Now, I guess you usually say it really is kind of about the philosophy and a bit of the training. And so, back when the profession was defined and established back in the late 1800s by Dr. Still, he wanted to take a very holistic approach to patient care and taking into consideration many different things, kind of a mind, body, spirit approach, if you will. And so that holistic approach is something that the osteopathic physician is really trained on throughout the curriculum and emphasized in the training. And looking at many different things, the body is one unit. So looking at that interrelatedness between the body systems and structures, looking at different other influencing factors that might be contributing to the patient situation, things such as maybe one's gender, one's life stage, one's race, ethnicity, culture, one's occupation, work environment, one's socioeconomic situation, home environment, one's spirituality, one's mental health, looking at all these different things, again, taking that holistic approach. And the other thing, too, that is really noticeable when looking at the osteopathic curriculum that you won't find in the allopathic curriculum is training in osteopathic manipulative medicine, or OMM. And that's the ability for the DO to use that tactile sense as a diagnostic tool, that sense of touch, diagnosing the different structures or tissues may not be in their natural state. And then as a treatment modality, be able to manipulate those body structures and tissues to restore that structure and restore function. So that's kind of an additional training, diagnostic and training tool that the DOs use that's part of the curriculum that does set it apart. You mentioned similarities, and the similarities, I think the list of similarities is greater than maybe the differences. And that is that, you're going to find that the curriculum is structured very similar. Your first 2 years of medical school are going to be, embracing and covering all the biomedical sciences. We have a very integrated curriculum. We'll talk about that later, I'm sure. And then the third and fourth year, of course, are more clinically oriented in your clerkship when you're doing your various rotations. So, that's a very similar structure. And then, of course, your graduate medical education, your residency training, that's identical as we're both single accreditation now. So through ACGME. So the time and duration of training is the same as well, as is the scope of practice. So, DOs practice in every specialty and subspecialty as their MD counterparts. So, Again, the list of similarities goes on and on. I think.
Yep. They work right alongside each other.
Yeah.
In all the hospitals.
Train alongside, practice alongside of each other.
John, what have you found to be some of those common misconceptions that pre-medical students sometimes have about the osteopathic medicine route?
Yeah, that's another great question. And I think one of the things, and I kind of alluded to it, is that thinking that maybe the opportunities aren't going to be as great as if you were an MD. And I can tell you that, there's nothing further from the truth, is that, like I said, DOs enjoy the same scope of practice as the MD. And so, whether you want to be the family practice physician or the cardiothoracic surgeon or the obstetrician or the pathologist or anything under the sun, all those opportunities are going to present as an osteopathic physician as well. And then two, the different practice environments. All you've got to do is look in your backyard, Christian, and look at University Day Hospital System or the Cleveland Clinic System, and you're going to find a bunch of our graduates on staff in all sorts of different disciplines throughout the system, and DOs practicing all over the country in various capacities and around the world as well. So I think that's one of the big misconceptions is that scope of practice and the opportunities. And then two, the other is that maybe the level of difficulty or competitiveness getting in. There are a lot of folks that wish that were true, so they could be in our program. But the fact remains, as your program, Christian, getting into medical school is competitive, no matter whether it's osteopathic or allopathic, and certainly different programs experience different levels of competitiveness in terms of their entrance requirements. But you better be working hard and be well positioned to get into HCOM. That's for sure.
Yeah. I remember looking, it was a year or so ago, but your class averages are like almost the same as ours. So for students to think like one is less competitive than the other, it's not true. So that is a big misconception.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. You said that that the ACGME, which is like the graduate for people who don't know, that's like the graduate level for medical school, like governing body. Was this the first year that DOs fourth years and allopathic MD fourth years went through the same match process together, or? Yeah,
this was the second year, actually.
Second year.
Yeah. And so, previously there were two accrediting bodies for graduate medical education. There was the AOA, which was the accrediting body for osteopathic residencies, which have been in place for, decades and decades and decades. And then there was ACGME that accredited the allopathic residencies. And so they started working on a single accreditation initiative probably about eight years ago, I'm guessing, somewhere in that ballpark. And so it came to fruition last year. So last year was the first time that there was one match, the NRMP, the National Residency Match Process. And all the residencies are accredited by ACGME. And I think that was a great move, because having that one accrediting body, it forced all the residency programs, whether it was osteopathic or a previously accredited ACGME program, to really take a close look at their programs and make sure that they were at that high standard that everyone would expect for a quality GME program. So I think it's been a good thing for graduate medical education.
Yeah, I know this was in the works for a long time.
Yeah,
we were really talking about that for a long time, years and years. Jill, we're going to get ahead of ourselves. I don't care before we get in the curriculum. But Jill, when it comes to the fourth years, DO students had to take the COMLEX. It was like the analog to USMLE Step 1. Is that changing now to everybody's taking Step 1? Is that gone into place yet, or is that still separated?
No, it will. I think it's going to remain separated, because the COMLEX will have questions on it about osteopathic manipulative medicine.
Okay.
So I think the biomedical science stuff is pretty similar.
Yeah. I
think the only thing that's different is the way that the questions are asked and the fact that there's OMM on the COMLEX.
Okay. So if a graduating DO student wants to apply to ACGME, will ACGME now take both COMLEX and Step 1, or do those students have to take both those licensing exams?
No, they only have to take the COMLEX. That was part of the agreement that was reached.
Oh, that's cool.
So I think that there's still kind of a breaking in period where we do have DO students who still feel compelled to take the USMLE, especially for some of the higher competitive residencies. But in truth, they only have to take the COMLEX, and that should be accepted by all program directors.
Well, and starting next year, step 1's going to be pass fail. So it's not like if you feel like you need to go and knock a step 1 score out of the park to be quote unquote competitive for a certain specialty. It's just going to be passed just like everybody else.
Yeah. I guess that'll be interesting. When it transitions to the pass fail, there's still some, like Jill's mentioned, there's still some residencies out there. Like you said, some of the more competitive ones, whether it's, ortho or ophthalmology, what have you, that still want to see USMLE scores. Whether that is going to change when that USMLE score is going to be a P as opposed to some numeric score. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But we're fortunate we got a really good residency advising team at HCOM that helps the students identify those programs that are maybe still looking for USMLE scores. So all right. So now we've taken care of that business. I want to dive into the curricular highlights of HCOM. And so when we're going out and back in the good old pre-COVID days, we're going to all these fairs and stuff. And remember those days? When students walk up to your table or they come to your information sessions, Jill, what are some of those highlights that you like them to hear about your curriculum in the first, that stick with the first couple years? Like, what are those things that you like them to know about that?
Many things, actually. Probably the first thing that we like to talk about is that we revamped our curriculum starting in 2018. It actually has a name. It's called the Pathways to Health and Wellness Curriculum. And prior to that, we had 2 separate curricular tracks at HCOM. There was one that was kind of problem-based and student-driven and small group-based. And then the other was a little bit more systems-based lecture format. We essentially took what was working the best out of both of those styles of delivering content and created the Pathways to Health and Wellness Curriculum, or the PHWC. And what this does is it lets students learn how to apply knowledge. It's not just about learning something so you can pass a test. And the way everything is formatted is pretty unique. We give our students a prep guide, is what it's called. And usually, like on a Thursday, they have the weekend to kind of go through the prep guide. And this prep guide has objectives in it. It has links to articles. It has pre-recorded materials. Like everything the student needs to know for that week is in this prep guide. And when they come in on a Monday, they're going to take an individual readiness assessment test, or an IRAT, as they're called.
Everybody has cute little acronyms and code words for everything.
Oh, yeah. We speak a whole stream of letters and acronyms.
Sorry.
So they take this IRAT, and that helps them figure out where the gaps are. So in the old curricula, you had these high stakes tests where, if you didn't know that you didn't know it, you didn't figure that out until you failed something. Yeah. With the PHWC, it's formative, low stakes exams. And then
so are these, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but are these IRATs, are they graded, or is it just to show that, you get some knowledge gaps here? Is it like a formalized grade, like pass fail, or is it tiered?
Well, it is a grade. So they know if they got, 10 out of 15 or however they score them. But then they do have a chance, because we do everything in groups. So after they take the IRAT, the student is together with their group and they're going through the patient case. And our semesters have themes of wellness, states of wellness. So the very first semester of the first year, all the cases are well cases. That's the well semester. Then in the second semester of the first year, all the cases become acute illness cases, with some of the cases they had as the first semester students following them. So there are cases that are built to be longitudinal. So
cool.
For definitely the first 2 years. So Then the start of the second year, all the cases are chronic illness cases. And then we wrap up with a return to wellness. So the students have a chance to take another assessment with their group called GRAT, the Group Readiness Assessment Test. And then that really kind of helps them, kind of put it all together.
Yeah.
And while they are doing this, they are working with a team of people. There's always primary care physicians helping them through, the cases. We have a whole department of social medicine. So our students are always learning about social determinants of health, health disparities. All of that is integrated into our cases. And then the students have each other because in that group, everybody's bringing a different perspective, different healthcare related backgrounds. And so it's a really rich way to learn your medical education with all of the osteopathic manipulative medicine and medical morphology being clinically integrated in.
Cool. Do the groups change, or do students kind of follow their group for a semester or so before they change?
Right. They'll change at the semester.
Okay. All right. So you get to know your teammates pretty well over the course of that semester before they rotate and shuffle things up. Here's a common question that we get all the time. John, how early does a student get to start seeing patients at HCOM?
Well, you better keep that white coat handy because it's going to happen right out of the gate. So, you're probably going to start seeing patients within your first month of medical school as a first-year student. And that's historically been the case for us, which is great. Our students love it. It gets them to, work closely with our clinical faculty and see the reality in direct patient care with what they may have been learning in some of their eye labs and some of their clinical cases that they've been working with. And so, certainly our COVID climate right now has impacted some of those early, what we call CCEs, clinical and community experiences. But the students are still getting to see patients right out of the chute, a number of times each semester. So we believe on that hands-on early clinical experience.
So one of the unique things that I found when I was doing my homework about HCOM is that you don't just have one campus in Athens, Ohio. You have one also in Dublin, which is just outside. It's a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, and then one up here in Cleveland. So are their curriculas identical, or are they asynchronous? Are they different curricula? How does that work?
They are synchronous. We are one college, that is OUHCOM, but three different locations. So even before COVID, we were connected through a very sophisticated video conference system. So no matter where you're at, you are doing the same thing at the same time as students from other campuses. And so just because you're sitting in Athens, that doesn't mean that you're not going to interact with your classmates. In fact, you are. You're going to be seeing your Cleveland classmates, your Dublin classmates. Wow. You're going to be interacting, asking questions. The faculty could be in Cleveland and not in Athens. I mean, it really has given us just access to all kinds of amazing faculty because they don't have to drive to Athens anymore to give a lecture.
So can I say that when everything shut down about a year ago, were you guys in a good position to keep things rolling because you had that? So I remember when you opened up the campus in Cleveland, I remember hearing how you have this cool, virtual technology of, beaming classrooms and stuff. Everybody's like, oh, that's neat, but how does that work? And then we're all doing it. We had to figure it out on the fly. John, how was that transition pretty seamless?
Yeah, so it really was. And, but not without a lot of hard work, behind the scenes. But we were really well positioned to be able to flip that switch, if you will, and go to a virtual model. And, hats off to our IT folks at HCOM. I mean, they're just incredible. I mean, they're our frontline workers. And in terms of helping us deliver curriculum and maintain, everything that we do. But it was fairly easily accomplished. There are faculty that were very used to teaching in person that had to, I think they maybe had some of the biggest challenges of flipping some of their some of their learning activities to kind of a more of an online presence. But it was fairly
That's great.
smooth. It really
That's
was.
great. What's a typical week kind of like now in this Pathways to Health and Wellness curriculum? Is it full day activities? Is it half day, morning, afternoon? What's that look like?
Yeah, all of that actually.
Oh, okay.
So it is still basically kind of an 8 to 5 type of thing. However, you aren't, in class necessarily for 8 hours a day. So normally you are, online with your groups for about 4 hours or so a day. And if you're not, online with your group, going through your case and going through the IRS and all that, you would be in the medical morphology lab, or you could be in the osteopathic manipulative medicine lab.
Okay.
Or you could be doing our community and clinical experiences, or you could be working in our clinical training assessment center, seeing our standardized patients. So it has a rhythm to it during the week, but it's not like you are sitting in front of a screen or sitting in a lecture hall for 8 hours a day. You're constantly doing different things.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. So, what about research in the first couple of years? Do students have time to do research experiences or interests? Can they pursue those? John, I see you nodding.
Yeah, they can. And we're fortunate. We've got a really strong research component to the medical school experience. And so, usually we encourage the students to get your feet on the ground, hit your stride, as you get acclimated to the medical school environment and demands. But we have folks getting involved with research as early as the first year, maybe later in the first semester, certainly in the second semester. And we have some formal programs that take place. Our Research and Scholarly Advancement program, our RSAT, and that's a research opportunity in the summer between first and second year, where students can do research either with maybe clinical faculty, biomedical science faculty, maybe even our social medicine faculty. Incredibly productive time. Usually folks are getting one or multiple presentations or publications, out of that. And so, there's research across all three campuses. I think when you're looking at more bench research, biomedical science research, the infrastructure is maybe more in Athens for that. But we're fortunate with our clinical partners and the faculty that we have across our three campuses. There are a number of different research opportunities for our students, which is great.
Yeah, sounds awesome. Jill, you were talking about some of the community service opportunities. And can you give some examples of that? This is really, I think in the last few years, I've heard more prospective applicants asking how medical students serve in their local community, whatever medical school they're going to. What does that look like at HCOM?
It is super active, no matter which campus you're at. I mean, it's written into our mission that we are to, embrace the communities in which we are located, whether that's, rural like Athens or urban like Cleveland. So, our students take that to heart. And for example, in Athens, students might go out into the local school districts where, if you're familiar with Southeastern Ohio, there's some kind of poor counties down here. And, things have been cut out of public education, but our students will go in and, talk about, just basic health concepts, how to avoid STIs. Students will work as diabetes navigators. So our students are in the public schools. They're out in the communities with health fairs. We have 2 mobile health vans that cover a 20-county area here in Southeast Ohio, and students can volunteer on those. With Dublin and Cleveland, they're still out in the community, but it looks a little different. We don't have the vans at all campus locations. But students in Dublin are able to get involved with free clinics in the Columbus area and, various organizations within the Dublin area. And the same with Cleveland. Cleveland also has a unique program called Doctors on the Street, where one of our, I'm sure there's other faculty members, but one of those faculty members I'm most familiar with is Dr. Leanne Chrisman-Kwam, will take students and, they'll go and work in homeless shelters and deliver care directly to the people who need it most.
Wow, that's awesome. To talk about the third year and fourth year a little bit, since we're nibbling at that, the clinical aspect of it. From what I read, everybody does a family medicine rotation. There's a few required rotations, but they're sprinkled throughout the state of Ohio, right? So how does that process work? So when students are then assigned to one of these campuses or one of these hospitals in the state of Ohio, and for people that are listening, these hospitals are in like all corners of the state. I mean, I live in Westlake, and one of the designated locations is like right down the street from me, and they're in the Southeast Ohio and Northeast Ohio. So how does that work when students are assigned to those third year clinical rotations?
Yeah, it works really well. I mean, we're fortunate. We have such a large footprint in the state of Ohio. Mm-hmm. You might say that, we've got a campus in Athens, one in Dublin, one in Cleveland. But when you look at our clinical campus system, like you said, Christian, it's in Northwest, Northeast, Southeast, Southwest, Central. We're all over the place. And the way it works, for our Cleveland campus, our preeminent partner there is the Cleveland Clinic. And so our Cleveland students, they utilize the Cleveland Clinic system for their clerkship, for their third and fourth year rotations. And as you know, being in Cleveland, the Cleveland Clinic system is expansive throughout Northeast Ohio. And the Cleveland students, they pretty much consume all the Northeast Ohio Cleveland rotations. The folks in Dublin, our preeminent partner there is Ohio Health, which is the largest healthcare system in Central Ohio. We also partner with Mount Carmel and also Nationwide Children's. And so our students in Dublin will use the Ohio Health system along with Mount Carmel and Nationwide for their third and fourth year clinical rotations. And they consume most of those Central Ohio rotations. Athens, on the other hand, our students in Athens, since we don't have a large medical center or vast hospitals in Southeast Ohio, we utilize you might say kind of a lottery match system where students will rank order one of, how many other hospitals is it? Maybe a dozen hospitals, Jill, throughout the state of Ohio. And they rank order those hospitals in their order of preference. It goes through into a program, and it comes out and is a kind of a match assignment process where students get one of their top ranked programs, and then they'd be assigned to that hospital for years 3 and 4. So, and the great thing about the hospital system is that it has, very large major tertiary care facilities, level 1 trauma centers like St. Vincent Mercy up in Toledo, to maybe smaller community-based hospitals, to everything in between. And, we're fortunate we partner with some of the biggest healthcare systems in the state. We mentioned the Cleveland Clinic, Ohio Health, also the Mercy system, the Kettering system, which are really incredible systems as well. And you mentioned the required rotation. So, everybody, like you said, everybody has, has a set of core required rotations: family medicine, internal medicine, pediatrics, psychiatry, general surgery, what am I forgetting? Emergency medicine, I believe women's health. And so there's a core of required rotations that everybody does in year 3. And then, there are a few weeks of electives at the end of third year. And then, of course, your fourth year is basically all elective rotations. So, and the great thing about our students, that no matter our clinical hospital system, is that in your fourth year, when you're looking to do those elective rotations, or sometimes folks might say audition rotations, our students, no matter what clinical campus you're coming from or whatever preclinical campus you've come from, you have the opportunity to do elective rotations at any of our hospitals throughout our entire clinical campus system.
Okay, so because I was thinking if you're assigned to Firelands in Sandusky, Ohio, which is a little bit larger community hospital, but let's say you were interested in orthopedics, and maybe they don't have as many orthopedic cases there as they see in Toledo. So then you could go to maybe do some rotations in orthopedics at one of like St. Vincent's in Toledo.
Correct.
Okay, cool. I like how that works. Jill, one question I have when I hear when students are assigned to different cities in Ohio to go and do these rotations, where do they live? How does that work?
I think there's a lot of great things about HCOM, but one of the great things about HCOM is the way that our clinical campuses are structured. So these students really won't be going more than an hour out of their way. So they're able to have, an apartment, to have a home, have a life and a family, and know that they're not going to have to, drive, 3 hours or, be away for 6 weeks. Now that could be a little different during the elective rotations, and then students would, maybe stay with a friend, or there might even be housing provided, by the hospital. But in general, for all of your required rotations, you're within an hour of where your home base is.
So we're talking about all these locations around Ohio. One thing I wanted to ask you too, where do your students come from? Are they largely from Ohio? Do you have students coming to you from out of state? What's your class composite look like? Can I apply from not from Ohio? John, you want to?
Yeah, happy to answer that one. Yeah, we have a strong contingent from Ohio. A little different than Case. As a private institution, we're a state institution. And so when we were chartered by the state of Ohio back in 1975, there's a strong push for us to be showing a bit of a nod to Ohio residents. And so, we can take upwards of 20% of our class from out of state. So I'll tell you, we're not bashful about going outside the state to put the best class together. That's for sure. We want to get the right people on board that are going to help us meet our mission and move that forward. So, Christian, if you're coming from Texas, we'd love to talk to you.
Yeah.
If you're coming from Westlake, Ohio, we'd really love to talk to you.
Yeah.
So, we have typically on a given year, probably 90% or so of our folks from Ohio. And of course, the balance from out of state. We do, folks have to be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident to be considered for our program. That's one thing that, it doesn't allow us to go outside the borders necessarily of the U.S. unless you hold dual citizenship. And we have students coming from, all the different schools in Ohio, actually from all around the country. And, so they're coming from the larger institutions like Ohio State, coming from smaller institutions like a John Carroll University, and everything in between. And so we really enjoy a great diversity at HCOM. People coming from, many different walks of life. We have a number of non-traditional career changers, folks coming from a myriad of different educational backgrounds, again, creating a very interesting dynamic when you get into small groups, as Jill alluded to earlier. And it's fun to see all these hardworking people collaborate and bring their different perspectives and skill sets to the table, working towards the same end. It's really positive.
Yeah. How did students submit their preference of campus location? We're kind of getting into some application stuff a little bit, and I don't want to stray too far away, but since we're talking about those 3 campuses, how do they at the time of like this, when they're submitting their application, they say where I'd kind of prefer to be, or you figure that out later? Jill, is that something that you see often?
Yes. So we do allow our applicants to rank their preferences in their secondary application. There's no extra fee. It's not like you're charged, $60 for one campus or another. It's just one flat fee. But you do rank where you'd like to be first. If you are ranking Dublin or Cleveland, though, we do ask that you write another statement or an essay talking about how you plan to positively impact that community or what ties you have to those geographic locations of Northeast Ohio or Central Ohio.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Before we move on to more application related kind of questions, is there anything we didn't highlight about the curriculum of across the 4 years? Is there anything that when you were coming in, you're like, I'm going to get ready to talk to Christian about this podcast stuff and want to make sure we get these points across? Is there anything else that you want to talk about that we didn't get to or didn't touch on?
Yes, I've got something.
Okay, yeah, let her rip.
So when I had mentioned that we have the Pathways to Health and Wellness curriculum, the one thing that I didn't work into my answer previously is the fact that we have wellness time built into the curriculum. We know that there is a high rate of, physician burnout, unfortunately, a high rate of physician suicide. And so we want our medical students to really learn how to take care of themselves as medical students, so they're better equipped for that when they become physicians.
Mm-hmm.
And, in the old days, we just kind of said, we want you to have a balanced life, go eat dinner,
Mm-hmm.
exercise, that kind of thing. But we never really gave students time to do that. So in this curriculum, there is protected time for students to be able to get the oil changed in their car if that's been, on their minds, or, just to meditate or to do some exercise. But we really encourage students to have that balance in their life. And other students who might be yoga instructors might offer some, some classes. So students will bring forth programming. We will, as a college, will try to bring forth programming, but we really want our students to be well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so important. That's so important because med school's tough. It's stressful. They need that time to decompress and go continue to do things because life still goes on as a medical student, right, Jill? So like you said, I got to get my oil changed. And sometimes you can only do that, during the day. You can't do that at night kind of thing. So it's a great example. John, what's something that you hear? Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. You kind of reminded me of it with your last comment. Medical school is going to be hard. I think everybody knows that coming into it. And the other thing I just wanted to share too that maybe we didn't address, I don't know if we're going to get to it, but in the curriculum, medical curriculum is going to be demanding. But one of the things we pride ourselves on at HCOM is a lot of support. Mm-hmm. And, certainly the faculty are very available and accessible, but also we have learning service specialists across all three of our campuses. And these are incredibly helpful resources for our students as they look to navigate the new challenges of jumping into a medical curriculum. Because, as you know, drastically different than undergrad or even grad school. And so we have folks here that are going to help them acclimate to those demands and really help them realize study strategies and approaches and time management skills, which are going to be critical to the success, but all specifically as it relates to the medical curriculum at HCOM. Mm-hmm. And the other thing, too, is that, it feeds into the wellness, is that we have a great emphasis on providing access to mental health resources as well. As Joe mentioned, there's going to be stress. There's going to be, times where you maybe doubt yourself and then imposter syndrome, or, you're feeling a little crispy and a little burnt out. Mm-hmm. And so we want to have the resources there for our students to be able to access and go to talk to somebody.
Yeah, just go talk.
And help them, make sure they're in a better place or a good place to be able to meet all the demands of not just medical school, but like you've all said, life, that continues to go on. So those are some of the things that folks should really know.
That's really important. That's a great point that I hope people hear, that there's resources at a lot of these schools but you have to, you have to access them, take advantage of them, because we can't always see. If we don't hear from you, we can't read your mind that you need help. And so, but their resources are there, like they're all there. And I love the idea of that, the learning specialists at your campuses, because that's such a great resource for students. Because people that are listening, you might remember when you went from high school to college, that first semester or two may have been a little rocky because you realized your high school study skills weren't translating to the way you need to study as a college student. And that same kind of experience could happen again when you get to medical school and realize, well, the way I studied as a college student isn't working the way I need to study as a medical student. So you might have to change tack and adapt a little bit. So having people there that can say, we've seen this before, this is how we're going to help you and kind of get you geared up to study as a medical student here at HCOM is just a perfect resource. So I love that. Yeah. John, what's something that you hear from current students that just kind of you hear them say they like the most about HCOM? Is there something you kind of hear them you pass in the hall, or like that you just kind of hear frequently, or Jill, that the common theme you hear?
Yeah, they really like that acceptance letter. No, that aside, that's a given. No, I think the thing that they really like about HCOM, and this really transcends all three of our campuses, is that it really is kind of a family feel. We sometimes say it might sound hokey, but it really is the HCOM family. And so everybody really feels that kind of close-knit kind of community that is HCOM. And, certainly there's unique vibes to Cleveland or Dublin or Athens, certainly, in terms of kind of the culture that might be more germane to that area of the state or that campus specific. But the overarching thing really is that HCOM family feel, and everybody knowing that everybody really is looking out for one another and has their best interests at heart, and that they're there for you.
Jill, what do you hear from students that you hear them just say that they are very fond of?
Honestly, it's the same thing that John just said.
Yeah.
And I think that happens because everybody at HCOM is all pulling in the same direction. Faculty, staff, everybody's there for that student experience and to make sure our students have as many barriers removed as we possibly can. And, we know that student could be our physician one day. So we want to make sure that they have everything they need to do well. So it really does come down to that family feel. I mean, I can't add much more to that.
That's great. Well, it sounds like a really supportive, fun and happy environment there for your students and the staff and faculty too, because it's all, like you said, they're all pulling in the same direction. So that's important. I want to switch gears a little bit and get to the admissions piece. We kind of touched on it a little bit when it comes to the application, and students can preference what sites they would like to potentially be assigned to. But, so just to quickly recap your application process, correct me if I'm wrong, they fill out the AUHCOM application, which is analogous to AMCAS. So it's like a one-stop shop, put all your experiences, GPAs, metrics, all that kind of stuff in there. And then they check off Ohio University, Heritage College of Medicine, and then you send them a secondary. And what is in your secondary that you like people to know they should prepare for? That you take from that? Jill, is there something tell us about the secondary part of the process?
Excuse me. Yeah. So the secondary is in some ways, I think, the more important part of the process, because that is, everybody's writing the personal statement on the primary essay, but in the secondary application, we're asking students to talk to us about advocacy. What does advocacy mean for them? Tell us about a time that you were able to advocate for somebody. And then we have a slate of 3 other essay prompts, and the student gets to select, which one that they want to choose. And so those essays really help us peel back the layers and understand who this person is outside of the metrics. So that is, I think, the most important part of the process. The primary application does a good job of letting us see grade trends and the courses you've taken, but the secondary app really gives us an idea of who you are as a person.
So when they get to choose from those 3 additional prompts, they get to pick when they want to respond to it. There's not a game there, right? Like, it's not you're looking for they didn't pick number 2, they picked number 3. So let's, no. Okay.
No trick questions, nothing like that.
Because I don't know if sometimes pre-medical students can analyze things pretty deeply. So there's not a game. They're not weighted differently. Okay.
Nope. Absolutely. Good point. Thank you.
Yeah. John, I wanted to ask you, we went through a lot of changes a year ago. Osteopathic, allopathic schools to go through our last interview cycle. What changes do you anticipate for 21-22?
Yeah, I tell you, it's last year taught us a lot.
Sure
that's
did.
For sure. And it sure was an opportunity to be creative. And so I think this year coming into it, we're still in discussion, but we're looking to still have virtual interviews with a possibility of an option of in-person interviews, and then looking for maybe some open visitation days for accepted students for those that maybe hadn't had a chance to physically visit the campus. And so we're still looking to iron that out a little bit. One of the things we found that with the virtual interviews was, we're still able to get a good feel for the candidates. Certainly you can't gauge the, strength or grip of their handshake in our virtual world. But, we still see that person's personality, perspective, passion come through when we're engaging them on that interview day. The thing I liked about the virtual interviews was it created a little greater equity, I guess, in terms of people being able to get to the interviews that they've been offered.
Mm-hmm.
It's people know, so, our listeners are going to find out it's expensive to travel around the state, travel around the country doing interviews. And so I like the way that the virtual interviews created a kind of a equal footing for folks that might not have been in a financial position to interview at all the places they would have hoped to. So I think that's one of the that kind of makes me think that, a virtual option might be something that's beneficial to, a good number of candidates. And it made it easier for interviewers to interview. I think they didn't have to physically go to some specific room, other than maybe their dining room or living room or wherever it is that they're coming to you from. In my sense, the game room. So, I think what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at things and glean best practices from what worked really well this past year, and look to retain some of those activities that created great efficiencies and effectiveness, while still trying to meld in some of those things that might have been the secret sauce for our interview day. That have really made HCOM a pretty darn special place. So.
Jill, when people would interview, do they interview at the Athens campus? Does everybody come to interview at Athens campus, or do you kind of space them out to Cleveland and the Dublin campus too?
No, when we get back to the before times, everybody will be coming to Athens to interview.
Okay. Last year, the AUHCOM came out with a statement saying that all of our schools are going to review applications with or without an MCAT at some point. Like if your MCAT was delayed, we've all agreed that we're going to screen without it until it arrives, kind of thing. Are you going to be have you heard from your national body, or have you decided you're going to keep that policy? Or John, is that something you're going to continue with?
Yeah, I think AUHCOM is getting ready to release. Of course, our application is going to launch here in about another 3 weeks, I think, on May 5th. So I know. Sorry to mention that, Christian. It's like the next cycle.
It begins again.
It does. And so it keeps us young, right? Keeps us going. And so, AUHCOM, or AUHCOM rather, the parent organization that oversees AUHCOM, is going to be releasing another statement similar to what was sent out last year. Matter of fact, it's almost identical. And so we're gonna continue the same practice and work under the umbrella of the AUHCOM statement. So if MCAT scores are delayed, we're still going to be reviewing applications as long as they're complete. Sends the MCAT, and also certainly the issue too with pass-fail courses and some of the considerations that have been made for that. So we're going to abide by the AUHCOM statement and as our candidates accordingly. One of the things, it seemed, and we just came out of our council meeting, I think the week before last, Cameo. And so when they were reporting out, and jump in, Jill, was it like 90% of applicants had an MCAT score or some extraordinarily high number?
Yeah, a lot more than we would have anticipated, I think.
Yeah.
Wow. Jill, how about do you recommend, or do students need to have some kind of a letter of recommendation from an osteopathic physician, or do they have to have had shadowing experiences with an osteopathic physician? Do you strongly encourage it? Or the reason why I ask is, as you know, all these students had basically their life put on pause over the last year. And if they had some of these things lined up, they weren't able to do it. So what do you think about that? Yeah,
in an ideal world, when we're not dealing with COVID, we would strongly encourage a student to have a letter from an osteopathic physician. But honestly, a letter from an MD is perfectly fine as well. It's about, assessing your fit for the profession of medicine. But it's a little extra special if you get a letter from a DO, because the DO community is still quite small. And so chances are the person who's writing that letter has, some connection to somebody who's on our committee, or, somebody just knows them from the profession. But in the times that we're dealing with now, it's still encouraged. And what we are recommending students to do is, even if you can't get into a clinical setting to be with an osteopathic physician or even an allopathic physician, try to schedule some time, to do a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting, because what we're trying to get out of that is for students to understand what is going to be expected of them in this profession. They need to know what the challenges are. It's always nice to talk to physicians too about, their path through medicine and that type of thing. But, in lieu of actually getting into a clinic and seeing patients and doing that kind of thing, just make an appointment to talk to a physician and really get a deeper understanding of what this profession is about.
Yeah, I think we've been hearing some similar things too, that we have to be prepared to see different kinds of experiences on applications that are quote unquote clinical, but they've been done over Zoom and like coffee with a physician, and just a short, 15, 20-minute conversation about their pathway, like you were talking about, Jill, and their challenges they face and things they look back on. John, what other things are you guys preparing to see that might look differently this year, as far as we're not going to see gobs of clinical hours anymore, and shadowing and all those kind of experiences? What things are you guys being open-minded to maybe seeing this year?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, we're so hoping to get back to some semblance of normal, because I think a lot of those activities, that we were used to seeing are so instrumental in helping the students really define, this is something that I really want to do for the rest of my life, that this is my passion. So I think when we see folks that have really made the extra effort to go and get involved with volunteer and service activities during this time, I think that really speaks to their commitment to wanting to give of themselves and to really let that altruistic spirit really kind of shine and be empowered to impact others. So that's really going to speak volumes, I think, for the candidates that have really searched those activities out, while still being, mindful of, trying to mitigate any sort of risk to themselves or to others while they're involved. Certainly we're going to see less shadowing, I believe. There's still going to be opportunities for folks to get involved, and not so much volunteer activities. Maybe they're more paid capacities, getting involved with like being maybe an STNA or nurse assistant, or maybe a phlebotomist, or some sort of player in that healthcare enterprise that is going to give them some experience and exposure. And then, of course, one that I'm sure you're seeing a lot with your candidates, just as we are, folks getting involved in being scribes. Yep. I mean, that's just been so huge. And is that shadowing? Sort of, not really the clinical experience. Well, yeah, sort of. I mean, on our evaluation forms, it kind of straddles the fence on a couple of different areas in terms of evaluation, in terms of work experience and clinical experience. But there are going to be opportunities out there still for folks to get some experience, and we're hoping the candidates, we can understand how this might be an easy answer or easy thing to say. Well, COVID prevented me from doing any of that. It's like, then how come I'm seeing some of these other folks that are getting these experiences? So you've got to be a little more creative and you've got to be a little more diligent, but there are going to be some opportunities out there.
I want to talk a little bit about your interview day. So you're going to be virtual next year. How is your interview day structured? I read you do three 30-minute interviews, but with who are the people meeting with? And is it an all day thing sitting on Zoom? Is it spliced up? What's that look like, Jill?
This is a great day, first of all. So we start off at 9 a.m. with some introductions. We have students, or the applicants, I should say, tell some fun facts about themselves. Because it's not just about us getting to know the students, but we want the students to get to know each other, because hopefully they're all going to be part of the incoming class at one point. So they start building those relationships the very first day on interview day. The rest of the morning is made up of informational presentations. We talk about curriculum and clinical training and dual degrees and just all types of things. then we have modules that we have sent out ahead of time regarding financial aid, our learning specialists, as well as diversity and inclusion. But then on interview day, we have those point people come in and just, kind of recap things and then are open for questions.
Great.
Then our students get an hour with current medical students, and then we get them a half hour, for lunch, get a little break and stretch and get some food. And then at 1 o'clock, they'll start with those 3 individual 1/2 hour interviews. The candidate will be completely finished with the interview process by 3:30. Some will finish as early as 3. And then this is where it gets really good. That committee, that team of 3 people that the student interviewed with, they're going to meet at 3:45 and make initial decisions and recommendations. And then at 4:30 that day, the entire committee comes together and we make final decisions.
No way.
And the students get to know the next business day, usually before 10:30. Yeah. Oh, that was great.
You're kidding me.
Nope.
So they get a decision within 12 hours or so, or, less than 24 hours after their interview day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Rolling admission process.
Yeah. Wow. So, John, what access to the application do these 3 interviewers have? Is it open access? Is it a scripted interview or like a standardized interview? What's that look like?
Yeah, it's an open file. And so our interviewers have access to everything that the candidate has submitted, their COMAS application, all secondary materials, essays and such, all letters of recommendation and so forth. And so the interviews, they're not scripted. And so it's very much up to that interviewer as to how they want to conduct that interview. We've got a great bunch of seasoned interviewers comprised of clinical faculty, biomedical science faculty, social medicine faculty, administrators across the college and across the 3 campuses. And so everybody has kind of their own style. And so I guess there's one thing that is scripted, I guess. And Jill, we're still asking the pathways questions, correct?
Right.
So each one of our interviewers is designated to ask one specific question. We have 3 specific questions that our pathways directors formulated to kind of get a thought for how they would acclimate to that learning environment. And so other than that, it's pretty open. And the interviews are very, very conversational, very much a discussion.
Yeah. Well, that's always relaxing. I think that sometimes candidates are surprised at sometimes how relaxing we want these conversations to go, because we want to meet the real candidate, not the stress ball candidate. And so if we can make them conversational and let them settle in and try to take a deep breath and be themselves, we get it. There's a lot of anxiety that goes with these interview days. There's a lot riding on it, right? But if you can relax a little bit, I hope people hear that we just want to get to know you. Like, we want to get to know you. And I think that should be reassuring to people. So they find out the next day if they've been accepted. What if they're waitlisted? What if, when do you come back to that group?
So usually in May. So we do have that rolling admissions process. Like John said, we typically start interviewing in mid-September and we go all the way through late April. So we do have students who, get placed on the alternate list or the wait list. We use those terms interchangeably, even in September. But we offer feedback to students who want it. And then hopefully the student will, give us some updates about what's going on. So, if the feedback is, we'd like for you to have, some more shadowing hours, when that's possible, we would hope that the student would, do that and then update us. Then in early May, the selection committee comes back together and then we rank everybody who's been on the alternate list. Then we wait for people to leave the class, and we typically go to our wait list every year. I think in the 18 years I've been here, and 25 some years that John has been here, I think there's maybe only a handful of days where we either didn't go to the wait list at all or went really shallow into it. So.
John, what
is not a black hole.
Yeah, it's not. It's not a bad place to be sometimes. John, what do you say to the candidate that says, hey, I'm going to apply to the allopathic process too? Do you dissuade them from doing that? Do you think candidates should they tell you that? Do you just kind of expect they're applying to both? Like, what's your advice to those students?
Yeah, my advice is getting into medical school is incredibly competitive. And so, casting a net that's broad enough to put you in the best position to secure an acceptance is highly advisable. And so, I wouldn't want to dissuade somebody from, applying to, let's say your program or some other allopathic program. I want folks to explore early opportunities that might lend to them finding the best fit for them.
Yep.
Because that's what's so important. And the reality of it is 85% of the folks that are applying to DO schools are applying to allopathic schools. And so, folks are swimming in both ponds or both pools, if you will, and giving themselves an opportunity to, like I said, find a program that's going to best mesh with maybe their learning style or their personality or just their overall general comfort level. And I think that's so important. And so that's it's understandable. And here in Ohio,
there's 7 med schools.
Yeah, there's 7 med schools. And so, and the old adage, you typically have the best chances of getting into the med school in your home state. So it's interesting. And so folks will take many things into consideration when applying, whether it's location, whether it's curriculum, whether it's climate, culture, what have you. But
your colleagues from other osteopathic med schools, do you think they think the same? Or are you an outlier? Because it sounds like you're really open to, applicants swimming in both pools. And I think that's great. But do you feel like your counterparts maybe at other schools are in alignment with that? I would like to think so. Yeah. I mean, everybody wants to fill their class with the best students, of course. But I think so. I think when you really get down to it, everybody wants the person to come to their program that's had an opportunity to look around at other programs and know that this was their decision and this is where they want to be. Now, the flip side of that is nobody wants to feel like they're playing second fiddle. Right. Yeah.
And it's like, well, you guys really are my backup, but the old any port in a storm. Yeah. They say, what's the best medical school? The one that you got into.
That's right.
But I think my colleagues are of similar mindset, as long as folks are genuine and their desire to be at their program.
Yeah. Well, I asked that because I want people to hear that it's okay and you should consider both. Like I've told applicants sitting in my office, like, look, if you want to be called doctor, you'll consider both. Because at the end of the day, whether you go to one or the other, they're still going to call you doctor and you're still going to see patients. And it's not like one is witchcraft and the other one's not. We talked about this initially in our conversation that they're doing the same things every day, rubbing elbows at Cleveland clinics, and Ohio Health across the country. It's just, it's the similarities are more than the differences anymore. Any kind of final thoughts before we kind of wrap things up and I let you go? Because I really appreciate the time. We're running out of time that I asked for you to give me today. Jill, anything we didn't talk about or any kind of final thoughts that you wanted to share?
Probably a lot. The one thing, though, that I want to toss out there, if we can do a little commercial, so to speak. Yeah,
that's what we're here.
I do want to mention our summer programs if John hadn't had a chance to mention those yet.
Oh, go ahead.
So, we offer 2 summer programs that are ideal for rising undergrad seniors or those who are, out of college, maybe career changers or people just looking for an opportunity. So one of the programs is called SURF, and that stands for Summer Undergraduate Research Fellowship. And it's where you will work usually at the bench with a research mentor for 6 weeks. There's a stipend and a living allowance, and you get a guaranteed interview to OUHCOM at the completion of that program. along the same lines and running concurrently, we have another summer program called Summer Scholars. And that one is completely different. It is more like a medical school boot camp, if you will. And it's mainly available for, well, you have to meet an eligibility requirement, one of these three. You would either need to be a student from an underrepresented minority community, somebody who is economically disadvantaged, or you could be educationally disadvantaged, meaning neither parent has completed a 4-year degree.
Okay.
So just one of those three. And then you spend 4 to 5 weeks at OUHCOM really living the life of a first-year medical student. You're taught in the same curricular format. You're learning through cases. You're doing some gross anatomy or medical morphology, as we call it. We do a clinical experience when we're back, in person. We're doing it virtually now. But that program also gives students a guaranteed interview. And, Summer Scholars and SURF are right now kind of the first entry points into our pathways into medical school.
Oh,
so
cool.
those are some really
Sounds
cool
like mini med school. Yeah. Okay. I'll put links to those in the show notes. So if people want to go and explore those a little more, it sounds like a great opportunity to kind of dip your toe into what things, the second one sounds like you dip your toe into what it looks like as a medical student at OU. And then the other one, certainly the research opportunities. And do both have opportunities for interview, or just the SURF one? Both do.
No, but both of them do.
Okay.
Yeah. Now you do have to have a current application through OUHCOM, and you'll have to have the MCAT score. Again, if we're talking, non-COVID times, you would have to have the MCAT. Just meet the regular admission requirements before we could offer the interview. But yeah, those are the stipulations.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you mentioned those. Those are really cool, and I know applicants are always looking. Prospective applicants are always looking for different summer opportunities to go see a school up close. So that I'm glad you mentioned that. John, any final thoughts before we wrap things up? Kind of to put a bow on our conversation today.
Well, I tell you what, I just want to say thanks so much for the opportunity to chat with you today. It's great to be able to share a little bit of information and excitement for the Heritage College of Osteopathic Medicine here at Ohio University. And, as we've said, I think one of the things to keep in mind is make sure that you're doing this for the right reason. Always remember your why. Why is it that you want to become a physician? Why is it you want to make a difference in people's lives? And make sure that, if you're thinking about this pathway for yourself, that you're best positioning yourself along that way and leveraging some of the resources and support in this process, your faculty, your pre-medical advisors, medical school admissions officers and staff, because it's not necessarily an impossible path, but it can seem daunting, but it's more doable when you know you're in it and you're not alone. And so reach out to those that can help you in this pursuit.
Yeah. Well, thanks, you guys. This has been really informative. And I love hearing about different medical schools and all the neat programs and things like that. So I've enjoyed this conversation too. And because I haven't seen either of you in a little while in person, but usually we bump into each other at some college or university fair thing. So I look forward to having those days again and to thank you in person. So I'm going to wrap it up with that, and we'll see you in the future. So thanks, guys.
Christian, thanks so much.
You bet.